STS Devotional number 228, and today's date is April 26, 2017. We're spending some time this week looking at Isaiah 53, and we want to take a look at verse 3 today. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. We have to keep in mind that this is not talking about 33 AD per se, but it's really giving us insight into what happened in the atonement prior to the foundation of the world. In Psalm 22:6, we also read, "But I am a worm and no man, a reproach of men, and despised of the people." We could spend quite a bit of time on just this Hebrew word despised in these two verses, and a lot more on all of Psalm 22, which again is a messianic psalm that gives many details of the spiritual agony that the Lord Jesus had to endure as he became sin for his bride, the eternal church, again, prior to the foundation of the world. And we see many of these details in the demonstration or the tableau, which took place in 33 AD. And because of that tableau, we're able to gain further understanding. Without that, we would be really at a loss to understand many of the details of the atonement if it wasn't for that demonstration, because it took place when nobody was around, just the Godhead and outside of time. Now, let's consider another citation, and this is in Numbers 15:31. Excuse me. "Because he hath despised the word of Jehovah, and hath broken his commandment, that soul shall utterly be cut off. His iniquity shall be upon him." All who have broken every one of God's commandments or laws are guilty. Let me restate that. All it takes is for someone to break one of God's commandments, and he's guilty of breaking them all, according to James 2:10. "For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all." Furthermore, since this is the lot of all mankind who are conceived in sin and born in iniquity, according to Psalm 51:5, they will be cut off. And to be cut off is the language of circumcision, a spiritual circumcision typified by physical circumcision, and it is the penalty that is spiritual. Let me restate that. The penalty of being cut off has to do with the fact that we have to die and we have to go to hell, which is the grave. It is not a place of eternal torment. It is simply the grave, and ultimately to be annihilated at the end of the world, when this world and universe are going to be burned up, and God is going to recreate, as it were, from the ashes of that previous world, the new heavens and the new earth. This is also why Christ, who was laden with the sins of his people, had to be cut off during the atonement at the foundation of the world. In other words, he came under the wrath of God for those that he came to save, because he was their substitute. He did it in their place. Now, let's take a look at this word, the Hebrew word for rejected, here in Isaiah 53:3. In Psalm 118, 22 to 23, it's being quoted partially in Luke 20:17, and it's using a different word than the word rejected, but the idea is the same. And he beheld them and said, "What is this then that is written? The stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner." Just as man rejects God's written word, the Bible, so man rejected the incarnate word, the Lord Jesus Christ, when he walked upon the earth. And the Hebrew word for rejected here in Isaiah 53:3 occurs as frail. And by the way, this is Strong's number 2310. It's translated as frail in Psalm 39:5. Jehovah, make me to know mine end and the measure of my days, what it is, that I may know how frail I am. We can't even begin to imagine the pain and sorrow that the Lord Jesus Christ went through, not only the first time, but when he was making atonement, but the second time as well. It's just beyond our understanding altogether. The word sorrow appears in Psalm 38:17, and it's Strong's number 4341. In fact, in Psalm 38:17, we read, "For I am ready to halt, and my sorrow is continually before me." And this whole psalm really pictures the atonement of the Lord Jesus Christ prior to the foundation of the world. I'll read verses 3 through 7. Let me, I didn't really write that down. Let's see, let me just pull that up. Okay, there is no soundness in my flesh because of thine anger, neither is there any rest in my bones because of my sin. For mine iniquities are gone over my head. As an heavy burden, they are too heavy for me. My wounds stink and are corrupt because of my foolishness. I am troubled. I am bowed down greatly. I go mourning all the day long. For my loins are filled with a loathsome disease, and there is no soundness in my flesh. As we look at the Hebrew word for grief, and this is Strong's number 2483, we are confronted with the language that is described in Isaiah 1:5 of sickness and disease. Why should ye be stricken any more? Ye will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot even unto the head there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores that have not been closed, neither bound up, neither mollified with ointment. It's really a picture of, here it's talking about leprosy, or referring to a disease like leprosy, and the leprosy is a picture, a spiritual picture of sin. All right, the word hid. This is Strong's number 4564, and this is the only occurrence in the Old Testament where this particular word for hid is used, but its root word is more common, and it's found, for example, in Isaiah 29:15. Woe unto them that seek deep to hide their counsel from Jehovah, and their works are in the dark, and they say, Who seeth us, and who knoweth us? John 3:19 explains why this is so. And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. We see that the idea of hiding from God stems from our sinfulness, and we recall what it says in Genesis 3:8, even though, again, this is using a different word for hid, but nonetheless the idea is the same. And they heard the voice of Jehovah God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Jehovah God amongst the trees of the garden. The last word we want to examine today in our verse is this word esteemed. And we esteemed. And it's actually Strong's number 2803. This particular Hebrew word occurs over 14 times and is rendered in a variety of ways, mostly as count or counted. Job 18:3 poses this question, Wherefore are we counted as beasts and reputed vile in your sight? And Psalm 88:4 states, I am counted with them that go down into the pit. I am as a man that hath no strength. Time after time in this verse and throughout Isaiah 53, God gives us and opens up quite a bit of detail, which is especially coming to light in our day as we are learning more and more about the terrible price that God the Son had to pay in order to save his people from their sins.